So let's go ahead and build off what we just did by jumping into this short-term notepad example, okay? So this is where things are gonna kind of bump up in complexity a little bit. So I'm gonna hit Control C after clicking on my terminal to kind of reset there. I'm gonna type clear, and that's just gonna clean that up a little bit. We're gonna boost this up because we're gonna get a little bit more room here that we're gonna wanna work with here. So what we're doing in this file here is very similar to what we were doing in the previous example, except what we're doing now is you'll see that we now on line 13 here, we have this variable called notepad, okay? And what this is an empty string. And one of the things that you'll see people use sometimes with agents is they'll give the agent some sort of a notepad that it can reference, which is basically giving it the ability to record short-term memories. So notepads in this example are short-term memory because these aren't going to be persisting between our chats, right? So the key differentiator between short-term and long memory when it comes to agents is, does it persist between chat sessions or not, okay? So in this case, this answer is a no, because anytime that we run this file, this notepad variable is going to get reset here, okay? Same thing goes with the conversation history. All of that is going to get reset. What you'll notice here is we actually have this notepad tool. So this notepad tool is an object here in TypeScript. This is kind of corresponds with the OpenAI API and how that particular API actually expects us to pass in tools. So if I scroll down just a bit here, you'll see when we actually go make that call to the OpenAI API. If I could find it here, you'll see if we do a little search here, you'll see that we're actually passing tools here. So we're passing an array of tools to the OpenAI chat completions endpoint here. Okay, and so this is how we're using our tools. So in this case, we're defining a tool called Notepad, and we're saying the description of this tool is use this function to write to your Notepad, okay? And you can see it takes in a single parameter, which is the parameter content. You're saying we're making that required, okay? And content is just a string that's whatever the AI wants to write to the notepad. So what you're going to see when we run this particular chat is we're going to be able to chat, but what the AI is going to be able to do is, because it has access to this tool, anytime it deems it necessary to record something on its notepad, it's going to call this function, it's going to save it, and then what's going to happen is over time it can refer back to that notepad anytime it wants. And the way that it's actually going to refer to that notepad is that we're actually just injecting, you can see we have this system prompt construction here. We're saying you are a hopeful assistant. You have a notepad that you can write to keep track of information about the user. Here's your notepad. And then what we're doing here is we're just populating this variable here that we have up here. So all of the information, right? So if I tell the AI, for example, like, hey, I live in San Francisco or something, it's going to be able to record that information. And then if I ask it that in the future, in the same chat, again, this is short-term memory, not long-term memory, in the same chat, it's going to be able to have access to that information, which is pretty cool. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to run this just because I want to show you what this means. By the way, just as a side note, I know I mentioned this in the last video, we're not going to be writing all of this code from scratch here. We're kind of going over things conceptually, and I've sort of built these tools to help demonstrate the points here that I'm trying to make. Again, we're going to get into building agents from scratch down the road, but we just want to make sure that we cover all of these things conceptually. So again, if you want to write this from scratch just to practice and kind of go through it, super helpful. Like, one of the things that you can do is you can go over to like cursor chat here and say like, please explain this entire thing to me. And what it's going to do is going to inject that into context, right? And cursor is going to go ahead and explain this entire file for you. So if you want to get into more of the weeds of what the code's doing here, right? What does this green mean? What does this reset? Okay. All of that, use cursor. It's going to be able to help you out with anything that you want to know on a code side of things. But let's jump back into actually the conceptual stuff around memory. So what we're going to do is, again, we're going to copy that relative path. We're going to go TSX, paste that path in, and we're going to still be in a similar format here. So if I just say hi, you're going to see we're getting a response back. Again, the model that we're using is GPT-4o Mini. Right now we're using this model because it's really cheap and it's really fast. Obviously, we'll cover in future sections why you're going to want to use more powerful models, especially as the complexity of tasks that you're assigning to agents goes up. We'll cover all of that, but for the sake of demos here, we don't really need anything complex. We don't need a model with powerful reasoning skills. We just want something that's really cheap to run and really fast. Okay, so perfect model GPT-4o Mini for this use case. So you can see it's just chatting like normal, right? How are you, right? We're going to get a response back from the AI, okay? But you'll notice in our system prompt here, I said you have a notepad that you can write to keep track of information about the user. So at a very high level, what we're doing here in the system prompt is we're basically giving it some sort of memory. Okay, so we're basically using in the system prompt terminology, we're using sort of instructions and memory almost interchangeably here, so you can swap those out. But what we're doing is we're being very specific on this line in particular about when the AI should actually use that notepad function that we gave it. And in this case, we're basically saying use the notepad to keep track of information about the user. So if I go back to the terminal here and I type my next line and I say my name is McKay, what the model is probably going to be able to do is it's going to say, wait, it's the user's telling me their name, which is information about the user. I should probably keep track of this. So what it's probably going to do is it's probably going to go ahead and call that notepad function. So the way that we've written, that I've written the program here is that you can see in green text here, it's basically logging the updated notepad. So you can see this line here has been added to the notepad. So what we basically have here, and you can't really see it, what we should actually do here is if I go to the very bottom here, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to console.log. We'll console.log the conversation history, and we'll also log the notepad at the bottom. What I'll do is I'll actually reset this. And this is actually great because you'll notice this is short-term memory because yes, the AI has updated the notepad, but remember, the notepad in this example does not persist between sessions. So if I start a new session here and I say, what is my name? The AI is not going to know my name because that notebook was reset because we started a new chat. Okay. So that's, again, hence short-term memory. So if I say my favorite food is pizza, we're probably going to see it update the notebook here. And now the favorite food here is going to be pizza. So let me actually figure out, I think I need to put these logs here instead. So what we'll do here is we'll do this one more time and I'll just say I live in Ohio. I don't actually live in Ohio. But what you can see here is we've now logged the chat history. Okay, so you can see we have this array here. This is the conversation history. So you can see the flow of this conversation is actually, I say I live in Ohio, and what happens on the OpenAI side of things, and you can see this and investigate this with the code here, is what we actually do is you'll see we add two messages here to our conversation history. We're pushing the message, which is the response that we got back from the model. And then we're also pushing the result from our function call. So you can see here we have a message as role of assistant, and then you can see we have this tool calls with a little object here. That's basically representing our tool call. And then what we're doing here is we're basically passing in the result of our call, which is just that user lives in Ohio got saved to the notepad. And then the assistant actually responds based on that information. Okay, so that's kind of cool. And then you can see here the string below the array here. Again, we logged conversation history followed by the notepad. So this is the notepad. So if I add something else, let's say I have 18 siblings or something, we're probably going to see in green text it update the notepad. And now you can see the notepad has both of those lines, right? It has that I live in Ohio and then I have 18 siblings. Okay. So one of the things you'll see as people make agents is sometimes they don't always want to like persist memories to a database. So what they'll do is they'll use a concept like a notepad. You'll hear things like Scratchpad or Notepad or Thinking Pad or any of these things. Sometimes you'll see like a planning notebook or something. People use this concept all the time for giving your agent basically the ability to kind of keep track of things over the course of a really long chat. It doesn't matter too much in this particular situation because the chat is so small. We're not truncating messages, right? So pretty much all of the messages that we already have, all of the information that needs to know are just in the chat history itself. But what you'll run into, for example, say you're building a coding agent and say you pass a message to the AI, it goes off and writes like thousands of lines of code or something, a super long request. And maybe you're truncating your chat so that it's only showing like the most recent 16,000 tokens. What's going to happen is you might lose some of your context. And if you use a concept like a notepad, and we'll get into like practical examples of this once we kind of put everything together at the end of some more of these introductory sections that are kind of going over the basic concept. You'll see how that comes into use because we can basically keep track of things that we always need to have the AI remember during the course of its chat, and we can just save that to some sort of a notepad structure. So that's kind of the key advantage of something like this. Again, this still classifies itself as something like short-term memory because, again, if we restart this chat and I say, where do I live? It's not going to know where you live, right? Because the notepad reset. So that is how to use the concept of a notepad with something like a function call in a really basic setting. Again, we're going to get more into kind of real world applications of some of these concepts, but we just want to make sure that we're starting you off here by understanding some of the basics here so that when we get to, scrapping like 6 tools with some sort of memory store and a planning notepad and some of these more complex agents that are like hitting real world APIs and things like this, all of these pieces are going to click. So let's actually jump into now using the concept of a notepad, but more into a long-term memory as opposed to short-term memory format.